to the kitchen. I'm here today with Rodda's to create a wonderful Sunday bake, and I'm so excited that you're going to bake along with me. You are going to love this recipe. So we're making a gorgeous chocolate cake full of clotted cream. So the first thing we're going to do is start off by making our sponge. So I'm using a stand mixer here. And if you don't have a stand mixer, you can just do this in a bowl with a wooden spoon. So I've got my muscovado sugar and my butter there. And I'm just going to mix it until it all combines. And then once it combines, I'm going to whack up the speed. So doing this in a mixer is nice and quick. If you're doing it by hand, it might just take you a bit longer, a bit of elbow grease, but you'll get the same result. So what I'm looking for is for this to go much lighter in colour and really pale and creamy and fluffy. So it's just going to take probably a couple of minutes in here. Whack it on the max and really beat it. Right, so as you can see, it's gone much lighter already. With the stand mixer, sometimes it kind of climbs up the side, so I'm just going to use my spatula just to kind of push it all down to the bottom. Sort of halfway through, just to help it mix more thoroughly. There we go. So I'm just going to, another minute or so, just get it really, really pale and fluffy. Got my coffee, always nice to have a coffee while you're making a wonderful bake. There we go. So that's really nice and pale and creamy. The next thing we need to do is add in our eggs. So we're going to use 6 eggs. So I've got my eggs over here, and I always like to crack my eggs into a bowl before I put them in the mixture, just in case I get any shell in there, save me having to pick it all out of the mixture. So it's just on slow. So again, if you're doing it by hand, just with your wooden spoon is fine. So we're just going to add them one by one. And just let each one get all absorbed into the butter and sugar so it becomes kind of all amalgamated, and then we're going to add them again one at a time until they're all included in the mixture. So that's all mixed in, so I'm going to add my next egg. Okay, so 4th egg. So when you're using a stand mixer, sometimes you get the kind of collection around the side and a little bit of a kind of collection in the bottom. So I'm just using my spatula to make sure that there isn't any sort of butter and sugar pockets that aren't getting mixed in. So just do that about halfway through generally. There we go. And then just continue to add the eggs. So this is the 4th one going in. Now, it might look a little bit curdled at this stage, but don't worry about that. Once you get the chocolate in there and the flour, it will all come together. And this is an amazing recipe because it's so rich and fudgy. There's hardly any flour in it, just full of brown sugar, eggs and chocolate mainly. It's so decadent, it's just such a perfect bake for the weekend. It's really special. So last one going in. And I'm going to add some vanilla as well to this. You can add in the vanilla at any point really, so I'm just going to chuck in a couple of teaspoons worth. Right, okay, so I'm just going to kind of scrape down the sides a bit. Now, the next ingredient we're going to add is the melted chocolate. So I've melted mine sort of 10-15 minutes before I started, just so it's not too hot when it goes in. Now I've melted mine in the microwave, just did sort of 30-second blasts until it was all liquid, but you can do it in a bain-marie if you prefer. It doesn't really matter how you do it, just make sure it's a bit cool before it goes into the mixture. So I'm just going to keep this mixing and just pour it in. I don't know about you, but mine is smelling incredible already. Just that brown sugar and chocolate smell gorgeous. With the brown light muscovado sugar, it's really caramel tasting, so it gives it a lovely richness, a bit fudgy. Over here. Right, so I just use my spatula just to make sure that that's all mixed in. There we go. And last thing we're going to add is our plain flour. So just make sure you don't really over mix that when the flour's going in. So I'm just going to keep my mixer on slow and just add it slowly and just let it incorporate until all of the powderiness has disappeared. Don't over mix it because it can become sort of heavy and tough. So just let that gently fold through. Again, if you're doing it by hand, just fold it through with a metal spoon until it's all incorporated. There we go. So still a bit floury, just give it another few seconds. So that's it. Don't want to overdo it. Now I'm actually just going to bring the last bit together just with my spatula, just to kind of make sure it's all folded through. There we go. Right. So just move my eggs out of the way here. So I'm just going to, literally just use the spatula just to kind of make sure there's no sort of pockety bits of flour before I put it into the tin. So we're going to use our 8-inch round tins now, which we've lined earlier. So you just need to equally divide it in between the 3 tins. And if you don't have 3 tins, it's fine. You can just do them 1 by 1 or 2 and 1, doesn't really matter. In actual fact, this is a bake-along, but you can actually do the baking of the sponges the day before if you want to. This cake lasts a good sort of week. It's a really nice long life cake, I think. It still tastes as good on the 7th day. So I'm just going to start filling my tins. Just grab this one. So you can see it's all nicely lined, which is going to mean it's going to come out nice and cleanly. So our coating is going to look really, really special. So about 1/3 of it in here. There we go. And just level them off. And just put the rest in my other tins. Right. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure they're level. Don't worry, you don't need to be precision, it will sort of flatten down. The great thing about this cake, it's kind of like a brownie in its style really, because you get a lovely flat cake and you get a nice crust on the top, which you leave inside the cake when you put it together. It's so good. So these are all done. So I'm going to put these in the oven. We're going to bake them for about 20 to 25 minutes. All ovens vary. Just make sure that you bake it correctly. So the secret to a really, really wonderful chocolate cake is to underbake it. So you don't want the knife to come out clean. You don't want it to be wet and glistening, but it should be a bit fudgy and pasty. So it should still have a bit of a wobble. So don't be tempted to over bake it because it will sort of like set more firmly as it cools down. So in they go. Okay. Right, so while the cakes are baking, we can get on with making the lovely clotted cream chocolate ganache that's going to go into our buttercream. So I'm just going to get rid of this because I'm going to need my mixer when I do my buttercream. So let's clear up our machines or our bowls, clear down our areas and come back to do the next bit. Okay, so while the cakes are baking, let's get on to our delicious filling. So we're going to make a gorgeous clotted cream ganache filling. So I'm going to do this by melting. I've got some lovely dark chocolate in here, and into that I'm going to use some clotted cream. So this is going to be even richer than a regular ganache because it's so thick and creamy and delicious. So it's really going to make it super special. So I'm just going to pop this into the chocolate and then melt it together. So I'm just going to put it into the pan and just going to melt it on a very gentle heat until it's all smooth and creamy. I'm going to let it cool down and then put it into the buttercream. Now if you don't want to do it in a pan, you can actually do this in the microwave as well. It doesn't really matter. So in this goes into the pan. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that on the hob, just on a very low heat. There we go. And just melt it together. So that's going to take a couple of minutes just to melt, so I'll keep my eye on it and keep stirring it. So what I'm going to do is make sure it's completely melted, nice and smooth, and I'll show you the consistency. And we're doing this now because we do need it to cool down a bit before we put it into the buttercream so it doesn't split. That's lovely and melted. It's quite runny at the moment, so I'm just going to pour that into a bowl actually and just let it cool down slightly before I do my buttercream. So we just grab a bowl. Put it into one of these. Actually just get all of that out with my spatula. Don't want to waste any of it. I want our filling to be nice and chocolatey. There we go. So I'll just pop this over here and move this out of the way. Okay, so now I'm going to make the buttercream. So I'm going to cream my icing sugar and my butter. So I'm actually using unrefined icing sugar here. I love this because it's got a really gorgeous caramel flavour. I've sieved it. You can just use regular icing sugar, not a problem, but in chocolate, I think it goes really well with chocolate. It's got a really lovely kind of like caramelly colour as well once it gets mixed in with the butter, which you'll see. And as you can see, I'm really messy. I'm putting icing sugar all over the kitchen as usual. Right, so there we go. So I've got some butter here and this is room temperature. So just try and undo it. This is how to undo a packet of butter. There we go. Oh, I love this. This butter is really delicious. So, okay, so I'm just going to pop that in. There we go. And a bit of vanilla extract. There we go. Now I'm going to just mix this on slow, but I need to make sure that I've got a tea towel because as you can see, I'm really messy and I'm probably going to turn it on and it's going to explode all over the kitchen. So again, if you're doing this by hand, you can just like mash the butter with the icing sugar with a spoon until it kind of gets combined and then whip it up. But I'm going to do it in my mixer. So pop it onto slow. There we go. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that all of the butter and sugar is kind of combined into one clump. And then once it has, I'm going to turn up the speed so it goes really light and pale and fluffy. So I think there's no danger there of that exploding on me. So I'm just going to whip it until it goes really nice and fluffy and soft. And then I'm going to pour in the clotted cream ganache. So look at that, that's been beating, it's nice and soft and fluffy. You can see that lovely kind of light caramel colour. So now it's time to add my ganache. So let's just make sure. So you don't want it to be any warmer than body temperature. That's nice and cool already, it's fine. So just make sure of that before you pop it in. So I'm just going to keep the mixer going and pour in that clotted cream ganache. looks amazing. Just grab my... Just get all of the outside bits of buttercream incorporated. And this is such a lovely, smooth and creamy buttercream with the ganache in. Just put that last bit in there. Right. Just give it a final mix. Done. Have a taste, everybody. That is so gorgeous. That's going to be amazing in between our sponges. So you need to make sure your sponges are cooled completely. I'm going to clear up. This is ready. Once your sponges have cooled, we're going to stack it up and fill it and get it ready for that final glossy coat of icing. So I'm just going to get this out here and grab your cooled sponges. If you've got a turntable, great. Just grab your turntable and whatever palette knife you have. If you don't have a turntable, you can just use your parchment paper like I've already told you. And we're just gonna split and fill and crumb coat our sponge. So, more clearing up and then we'll come back for the next bit. Okay, so we're getting to the fun bit. This is my favourite part, putting the cake together. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be adding our lovely ganache buttercream through the middle, and then we're going to give it a nice coating all over the top. And the reason we're doing this is because it is a wonderful Sunday bake. It's going to be special. What we're going to do is make a gorgeous pouring ganache that's going to go all over the cake. So if you do this kind of preparation, it's going to look really, really neat. Of course, you don't have to do that. You can just, you know, roughly fill it and cover it, and you'll get a nice cake, but you'll get sort of lumps and bumps. So I want to make this really special. I'm going to show you how to do it. So my cake's completely cooled. And I've got over here, I have got an 8-inch cake drum, which is the same size as the cakes we've baked. Now, it is quite handy to use one of these when you're doing this type of cake covering, but you don't have to. If you want to just put this directly on your cake plate and fill it and not do, you know, all the removal of the ganache later, you can do that. But I'm showing you how to get a really neat finish. So I'm going to use this underneath, and I'm using my turntable. If you don't have that, use your parchment. And I'm also using this extra cake board because I want to put it in the fridge to cool down. No, not to cool down, to chill before we do our last coating. So if you don't have one of these, you can use a flat plate or a bread board or something. Just makes it easier to move about. So let's grab our lovely buttercream. And I've got a couple of palette knives because I have all the palette knives. Just use what you have. This just makes it easier for me to get a nice finish. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get a little bit of buttercream and put it on the middle of my cake board. And I'm going to get this 8-inch and just kind of press it onto here like that. I want to keep it nice and central. Now I'm going to put the first layer on, so a bit of your buttercream, just kind of spread it over your board. And these cakes, once they've cooled down, they are fairly fragile, but you know, I can pick them up. If you're worried about picking them up, you can use a cake lifter or something like a sort of board underneath, but they are fairly sturdy. So I'm just going to put that onto the board. And I'm always just making sure it's in the middle. It just gets much easier to kind of cover it like that. And what you want to do is just add a nice dollop of your buttercream. So I'd say like a couple of heaped clonks. There we go, so that's probably about 200-ish grams. And then just use your palette knife, or you can even just use a butter knife if that's all you have. But what you want to do is just make sure you spread it and keep it all the same thickness. So I'm just kind of doing it from the inside out. Obviously you can see my turntable makes it easy for me to kind of get that smooth, even layer. But if not, having it on your parchment, you can just kind of spin it around. It just takes a bit more time. So I'm just pushing that all the way over the sponge layer. And as you can see, I've let it come out just a bit further out of the edge of the sponge, because that's going to be what I'm using to kind of fill the gaps in between each layer. So So sponge number 2. And like I said, that lovely brownie crust, we're leaving that in there. It's really nice, just get a little bit of the brownie crunch inside. So just pop that on, make sure it's nice and central. Just make sure it looks level. And do the same thing again, just a couple of nice dollops, just to kind of fill through the middle. There we go, and just spread it nice and evenly. And let it come over the edge. Just make sure it's not too thin anywhere. It's a bit more on here. There we go. So it's just a few millimeters thickness, I'd say. So for the last cake layer, the difference is what we're doing with this. We're going to turn it over like that, because the bit that was in the bottom of the tin that was against the parchment paper is not quite so crumbly and it's much smoother. So it's going to help us to get more of a smooth coating on the top. So just kind of press it down. And then what I'm going to do, just make sure that's in the middle. I'm just going to use my palette knife, just go all the way around the edge like that, just kind of smoothing in that excess buttercream into the joins. And I'm keeping it kind of like vertical against the side like that. And that's another reason why I'm using that cake board on the bottom, because it's really helping me to get a nice straight edge. So I'm sort of like pressing against that cake board there and just sort of filling in any lumps and bumps, any sort of gaps where you've had crumbly bits to start with. But I'm going to need quite a bit more just to kind of give me a nice coating. So now I'm going to take the rest of the buttercream and just put a nice big generous dollop on the top, like that. And again, the same way we did in the middle fillings, just backwards and forwards like this. And what I'm doing is pushing it towards the edge of the cake and keeping my palette knife nice and flat, pressing it fairly firmly. You can be quite firm with it. And as you can see, I'm kind of pushing it over the edges so you can see it wants to kind of cascade down the edge of your cake. And that's going to be the bit that I use all over the side. So now I'm just going to change the angle and just kind of push that excess all around. So just do it as neatly as you can. Don't worry too much, you know, it's going to get another coating of the lovely pouring ganache. And when we've finished, I'm going to dress mine with some blackberries and mint. So don't worry if you've got the odd lump and bump. Just do the best you can with it. You know, you want to have fun when you're baking, so don't stress too much. Just try and think about your angles really, and just make sure you can get it as straight as possible. So it's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to use my palette knife just to kind of smooth off and just filling any gaps. So you can see I'm actually covering the whole board. And you're not going to see that once it's covered in the pouring ganache. There we go. Like that. And where I've kind of gone around the side, you can see I've got a bit of a sort of lumpy bit around here. So quite often I'll keep a bit of kitchen roll handy, just clean that off. And now I'm just going to get it a bit neater. Because the neater you can get this bit means that the better your kind of glossy coating is going to look. So I'm just going to flatten it one more time like this. And then just go around the edge again, just kind of pushing that down, just to kind of sharpen off the edges there as best I can. There we go. Right, now you can leave it like that if you want to, but if you have one of these scrapers, if you don't have this, you can even use a ruler. It's just a nice way of like getting that final sort of straight edge. So I just like to kind of sweep it all the way around like that, keeping it nice and straight. And that just kind of gives me that sort of last sort of finish. And then if there's anything sort of like big here, I sometimes just kind of with my small palette knife just neaten it like that. But I am being a perfectionist because you know me, I like my cake making. So just get it to the best you can. And now what we're going to do is put this in the fridge. So we need to let this chill down for at least half an hour, ideally an hour. And once that's chilled, we can do the final stage, which is adding the pouring ganache. So more clearing up for us all. Let's come back with our final ingredients and a chilled cake, and we'll finish our wonderful Sunday bake. Okay, so we're at the final, almost final stage for our wonderful Sunday bake. So now we're going to make our gorgeous glossy pouring ganache. So what I'm going to do is just put my my mixer. I can work kitchen equipment, I promise you. Put my scales on there. So I need to put 150 grams of clotted cream into my saucepan. So this ganache is going to be not quite as thick as the other one that we made earlier, and we're adding butter to it so that when we pour it all over our cake, it still stays soft and shiny. So 150 of this. There, look at that, perfect. So clotted cream, and also we are adding butter. And just a little bit of chocolate. Now this is quite a lot of pouring ganache. I always like to make extra when I'm covering a cake like this because I don't want to have any holes or anything that's not completely covered, and you will get loads of excess that pours off the bottom of the cake, but you can reuse that, so I'll show you about that in a minute. So what we're going to do is just literally heat this very gently until it all becomes liquid. So heat on low. And again, you can do this in the microwave if you want to. So you just want to mix it until it's completely blended. There we go. So that is all liquid. There's no lumps in it, and it's ready to pour on the cake. So the best thing to do, I'm just going to grab a jug. I'm going to put it into a jug because it's much easier for me to get it onto the cake, and also it's just going to let it sort of cool it down a little bit before I pour it on. Oh, I could drink this. There we go. So just let that kind of sit in the jug, and that will cool down for a few minutes while I get the cake ready for pouring. So there we go. So just pop that to one side so I don't knock it over, because I am rather clumsy. So now it's time to add that gorgeous clotted cream ganache. So what you need to do is grab yourself a rack for pouring over. I've got a tray, so I'm going to catch the excess. In actual fact, get some of these crumbs out because you can use that again. So just pop it over there, and now I'm going to put my cake on the rack. So here it is, it's nice and set. And obviously we've covered up all the lumps and bumps. So I'm just going to get a palette knife and just with that board that was underneath, just pop that off of the working board and pop it on the rack. And this is the really fun bit. This is one of my favourite things to do. I've got a palette knife, but you can use a spoon if you want to. I'm going to grab a spoon anyway. So we've been working hard all day, and now it's time to do the last stage, which is adding that lovely ganache over. So all you need to do is pour it all over the top of the cake, and then just using the jug we can kind of like see that we're covering all the sides and make sure it's completely coated. So I'm just going to kind of look around. You can go over it again, but basically this is why we're using loads, because we want to make sure it really, really covers it. So here goes. Look at that. And just let it cascade all over the sides. Oh, wow, heavenly. Just going to have a look and see if I need to, I'm going to come around here a bit, just make sure I haven't got any bit of cake showing. So that's why we need lots, to really kind of like get that lovely smooth coating. Oh, I'm happy with that. Just put that to one side. So just give it a gentle tap. There we go. Sorry about the builders next door. They won't be getting any of this cake. It's all for us. So what we need to do now is just leave this to set, probably about half an hour or so. and then you can put it onto your cake plate, you can put it onto your cake stand, and just finish with some berries. So we'll just leave that to set, and then we'll come back for the final flourish very soon. It'll be worth the wait. So the moment we've all been waiting for, we've got our gorgeous cakes. Now it's time to lift it off of our rack and pop it onto our plate or our stand. So I just use a sharp knife and just go around the bottom. Obviously we've used that cake board underneath. Obviously if you've decided just to do this straight onto a plate and let it have some like pourri ganache on the bottom, that's fine. So now I've released it. So I'm just going to get my palette knife. And doesn't it look gorgeous? And just put my hand underneath. Obviously I've got that cake board under there. And then just place it on the stand. Just try and get it in the middle because I like things to be nice and central. There we go. So this can be scraped off and frozen. You can use it for piping. You can melt it again. So look at that. Gorgeous. So I'm just going to add a little bit of decoration around the bottom, a few blackberries. And perhaps a few on top. You can decorate it if you want. You can use any berries, you can leave it plain. Even a bit of gold shimmer is lovely. Just a little bit of mint to add a touch of greenery behind here. There we go. Looks lovely. There you have it. I hope you've enjoyed baking along with me. Thanks to Rodda's for having me, and I hope you've enjoyed doing your wonderful Sunday bake. And come on, grab some extra clotted cream. Let's have a slice.